6, a 5, 6, 7, 8. Welcome everybody to the show. We're so happy to have you here. I'm Jo Hoffberg. That's Forrest. That's Phil. We are excited to have you. Yeah.
Ja, hallo an dich Zuschauer. Du bist hier bei mir, bist du schön Podcast SwingTanzen unterm Schwanz.
Und dem Rest der Welt.
Ja, wie du schon gehört hast, wir haben heute einen Gast, Jo Hoffberg aus Berlin.
Ja.
Und uns hast du schon gehört und wirst du uns schon hören. Ich weiß gar nicht, Joe, do you know what our title means? Because it's a bit weird. It's like swing dance. How do you say it? It's
Tell
like
me one more time, auf Deutsch. Ja,
Swingtanzen
Swingdancing.
unterm Schwanz.
Something in the Schwanz.
Yes, right. And Schwanz, it's like a double meaning. It's not the male.
It's dick and
it's not dick.
It is dick and it is tail at the same time.
And its tail at the same time in German. And in Hanover, we have a statue of a prince who lived here, and it's in front of the train station, and it's a meeting point. It's like unterm Schwanz. We meet unterm Schwanz. And nobody who's not from Hanover thinks we are just crazy because we say dick.
Because they know what that means.
Yes.
Yeah, when you said that, I was just like, I think I know that word, but I don't think that my German must not be very good. I'm sure that's not what it's called. Okay, so it is.
That's not what he said,
I actually
right?
understood that correctly. So that's
Yes. And it's so
did.
funny. If you learn a different language, either it's German or English or something, you learn some of the first words you learn is swear words, or
Sure.
isn't it like this?
Yeah, or the things that your friends are like, ooh, Joe, you should go say this to the bartender. Like,
Yeah.
you're gonna be out somewhere and they're like, well, here, like, they're happy to talk to strangers. So you're like, okay. And then you say something, and then when the bartender looks at you terrified, you're like,
Yes.
I'm American. I'm so sorry. And then they're like, your friends made you do this. And you're like, how did you know? And it's like, oh, okay. So yeah, so I think that's also why, as a foreigner, you often learn some amusing words at the beginning.
Yes.
Because your friends are like, you should go say this. And then everybody's just like, yep, there goes Joe. And then they'll all turn around and be like, wait a second, let's see what happens. And it's just like, you're getting punked, but you don't know how badly. So,
Yes.
Yeah.
The best thing that we taught a French person who lived here for a while and was in the dance scene. We told him the German sentence that is very, very important for Germans to know. And this is in English then, excuse me, where is the fire extinguisher? And he learned it so hard. And it was, I don't know who made it up, but he really learned it hard. And then he asked everybody, excuse me, where's the fire extinguisher? And everybody was like, what are you talking about? What's happening with you?
But why are you doing this? It's
Yeah.
so funny.
And why would you do this? I always thought it was bewirtungsbelegt. Like, I kind of felt like
yeah.
that was one of the very early words that it was just like, Joe, memorize this word. It's super important. Bewirtungsbelegt. And every
Yes.
time you eat, ask for one of those. I was
Exactly.
like,
Yes, it's so typical German because you need it for your taxes.
and
So
that is
it's
my
so
experience.
German.
Yeah, natürlich.
It's so German.
No.
First thing I think about it's my taxes when I'm eating.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah, I know, right? You're like, somebody in the government is going to care about this meal. I have to make
Right.
sure I fill out
Yeah.
the form properly.
Yeah. Und Bewirtungsbeleg, sehr schönes Wort. Pretty word. Pretty
Yeah.
German word.
Yes, it is it's a very typical, sehr typisch. So,
Yes,
Yeah.
sehr typisch. Yeah, we tend to crunch or make a big word of several words just
Yes.
to make it a word and just to
Yes.
have it.
I've noticed that every now and again when I'm like, I should practice reading German again, not worrying if I understand it, but just practicing saying words. When I get to the longer ones, I'm always like, I don't know if this S belongs to that
Mhm.
word or that
Yes.
word. Or sorry,
Yes.
that
Yes.
word or this word for my non-visual participants here in the conversation. Yeah, so there's definitely times where I'm like, oh, why would you make a word with that many letters in it? How are you supposed to read it in time before you have to move on to the next page? It's very
Exactly.
stressful.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's so German. Longer words, the longer the better, the German thing, I
Yeah.
guess. And the
Size
more...
does not matter, Phil.
Okay, let's just...
Are we here again? Are we here again,
Are we
Boris?
recording
Are we
already?
here
Already,
again?
yeah.
What?
Unterm Schwanz. What do you say?
Definitely.
We can talk about it.
Absolutely. It's been one of the fun things, if we're talking about German still, is every time I get mail, it's always really scary because I'm convinced I'm in trouble. All of it, even if it's from T-Mobile or Vodafone, I'm like, I'm in trouble. I've done something wrong and I'm not going to be able to understand it. Luckily, there's technology so I can like scan documents and read it. And if it seems really scary, I'll send it to friends. I'll be like, hi, I know we haven't spoken in a while, but can you tell me if the government has just told me I'm in trouble? And normally it's like, no, you're fine. They're just like offering you something. And it's like, okay, I thought I owed them that much money. All right, good to know. Never mind. Thanks so much. It was great speaking to you. But it's terrifying to get mail. And all of my native English-speaking friends are like, yeah, the panic never really goes away. You just know that you can read it. So I'm like, okay, someday that will be me. The panic will still be there, but I can do it myself.
Yeah, I hope so, because some of the mails I even can't read, and I'm a German teacher.
Exactly.
So, I don't know. What do you want from me? Just tell me what.
Oh, you know what? I have this piece of letter that.
Oh my God.
That just comes from my energy thingy.
Nice.
And I just moved in this new flat here, and I just wanted to. I have just one little, what do I say? Not counter. What do you say?
Stromableser.
Stromzähler.
It's a German word.
Stromzähler. And Stromzähler. Yeah.
Energy counter.
And just one in my flat here, and I just wanted to say, hey, I moved in here, please. Yeah. Like here's my number, and
do what you want.
And then they sent me a registration, then a cancellation, then my last invoice, and then a new contract. Like, what is happening? Oh my God.
Yeah, German. Welcome to Germany.
Yeah. You didn't really put that in the brochure when I was coming here. Like, by the way, every piece of paperwork you've ever had in the United States, multiply it by 4 and then think about faxing it. And now you're in Germany. Plus, don't forget those Bewertungsbelegt. It's like, oh God, I'm never going to make it to the other side of this. It's been relatively easy being in Germany because, like, the German system is okay that, like, I'm a white American. Yes. But I will say, like, for the most part, there's so many scary things that I'm like, I know I should take care of this. And I know that the Germans won't forget that I haven't taken care of it. But sometimes it just feels too scary to like make the phone call to be like, I'll talk to somebody, because otherwise I'm like, I don't have enough verbs in my vocabulary that I can like comfortably do it. And if they're not speaking in infinitives or present tense, I'm like, oh no, hold on. Like I have to look that up as well. Wait a second. And then normally about half hour in, after me trying German for about half hour, they're like, we're going to find you the one English speaker. It's like, how do you only have one English speaker? I live in a city full of English speakers.
Yeah, that's
and this is typical German too. No? Everyone speaks English except in the system. How do you call it? Behörden?
Yeah.
Nobody speaks English there.
Yeah, it's terrible. Yeah.
I'm glad that you also are frustrated by that as well.
Yes.
I once was here at in the center of the city. I mean, we're a capital of one of our states.
Yeah. Yes.
And somebody came to me, I don't know where he came from, but he asked me really shyly, whatever, like, do you speak English? Yeah, of course. What do you want? Oh my God, I'm so surprised how well you talk in English.
Yeah.
So, what? Why? Because this woman over there, she just shook her head and she didn't understand anything. Like, okay, what's your problem? That was so crazy.
Yeah, I mean, at some point you're also like, I am embarrassed that I don't speak more German, but we still have to have this conversation in under 2 minutes. So like, I'm going to move past that. I'll be embarrassed later, but like, can you help me? It happens.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah.
We are at the how do you call it? At the Thema? What's the theme? The topic. Oh, the topic of the podcast. Yeah. We want to try to compare some scenes, maybe. I don't know why and where it leads us. But we want to try it. We want to try it. Yeah. And Jo, you did it already, but at the start of the theme, at the topic, we would like to introduce our guests. Where can we learn about you? Where can we see you? If you have social media channels or something you're cooking.
Yes, that's great. I'm a professional chef.
It's your time to introduce yourself.
Okay, fabulous. Well, okay, so if you would like to follow me, and you're a website person, ilindy.com is a great place to be able to learn from me and just kind of check in on the stuff that I have made a little while ago. Otherwise, Instagram is probably where I'm the most active. And what you know, Jo on Instagram, and then hopefully I can just also send you the handle so that you can include that in the show notes, hopefully to make it even easier.
We will it.
Fabulous. And then I am on Facebook, but I'm not active on Facebook. So there are ways to find me there, but there's a little bit of a break, and then otherwise email. So I would say iLindy and Instagram are probably the two ways to most easily get a hold of me. But if I was to give a quick rundown of like who I am, in case there are people listening to the podcast that don't know who I am, my name is Jo Hoffberg, and I have been doing Lindy Hop since about 2000. In 2007, I started my professional teaching career primarily as a partner dancer with a man named Kevin St. Laurent. And we started in the United States, and from 2007 to about 2015, we primarily did more lead follow based classes, more Eurocentric style teaching. And then in about 2015, 2016, when the Me Too movement kind of took the world by storm, Kevin and I rearranged our teaching so that we could foster a new environment in the community, as a number of the other instructors did as well. And we tried to highlight the follower's voice more, not just because it was a way of how we social dance, but because we felt like we needed to start having really new kind of conversations. And so we tried to do our part. And then in the last 2 years or so, I've been working on my solo, certainly the last year because of the pandemic, and then previously to that because I just felt like it was an area of my dancing I had not been working on. So in the last year, I've been doing some online classes myself, and then otherwise I've become a student again. So I myself also take solo dance classes in other Black American art forms and have been loving it. It's been very depressing and upsetting just to be a beginner again, because it's like, I used to think I was a good dancer and now I know I'm not. On the other hand, it's been so liberating because it's really nice to just show up and have somebody else have an idea about what I can be working on instead of needing to generate that mental energy of what am I going to work on? Have I made the time? Do I have the music? Am I ready to do all of this stuff? So getting to show up to class has been a really breathtaking thing. So that kind of takes me up to now in terms of my dancing that I've been working on becoming a better guest in Black American art forms.
Amazing.
Yeah.
I just watched the interview from Mikey, you, and Kevin from Lindy Fest. That was like, I don't know.
Long ago.
Yes.
Long ago.
Yeah,
we were young then. We were all young then.
Yeah. And they showed videos when you were even younger. And then you also talked about that you are taking classes as a beginner, maybe, and that you don't tell the people where you're taking classes so nobody will show up, but you also felt like a total beginner and it was frustrating, and then the learning curve, right?
Yeah, it kind of never really goes away. I think if you always keep yourself in the role of a student where you're like, I am always ready to learn and I'm always ready to surround myself by people who know more than I do, so I constantly can be in that position of absorbing from others, that it's equally frustrating but also freeing, where it's just like, this is really fun, but also at some point it would be nice to feel like I know something again. So I guess that's also maybe the main reason why I still kind of go back and forth, is every now and again I feel like I'd like to feel like okay about my dancing instead of like nothing is going well. So it's the forever toggle between I'm doing okay, I'm doing terribly, I'm doing okay, I'm doing terribly.
Yeah, I guess the feeling is something when you learn new things and you mastered some things, you always see what you can do, what you can't do.
Yeah.
It's a weird feeling. If you are a total beginner if you never danced before, you mostly don't see what you can do, but what you learned. But if you on a level where you mastered something, you always see, oh, I can't do that. Oh, it's terrible. It's a bit weird. But it's, as you said, it's really freeing. It's like I studied music and I'm playing the piano, and if I study, I always see what I don't, where I'm really bad at.
Yeah.
So and I don't see, oh, but I can do this.
Yeah.
it's so but it's nice. It's a nice feeling.
Yeah. I feel like as I've been now consistently able to take classes because I've not been traveling. So it's kind of like, well, there's all those hours I used to spend on an airplane. Now, what am I going to do with that time? I can, sign on to class. Is that it's kind of been nice to be that quote unquote uncomfortable for now an extended period of time, where before it was so unusual that it was really challenging for my ego to manage being that uncomfortable. And now that I've been that uncomfortable for an extended period of time, it just kind of doesn't go away, where I'm like, well, yeah, like learning is uncomfortable.
Yes.
And that's okay. And it's been really nice to have been in it now long enough to go, that's a terrible reason not to learn, is because you're uncomfortable, when by definition, learning is uncomfortable as it pushes you outside your comfort zone. So it's been nice to get past that. And it's also, I think, was critical for me to be able to start doing the work in terms of learning how to be a guest in Black culture, and like, what does that mean? And like how to look at my role in the Lindy Hop community, and where could I be doing better? And where have I made a number of mistakes, but was not aware of it? So like coming from a place where I have been making a lot of mistakes and just constantly feeling like, I can't do any of this well, made it a lot easier for me to emotionally go, here's another set of things I didn't do really well, but I wasn't aware of it. So being able to make that transition for me in many ways felt way easier when I was already in the mindset of being a student, of where it's like, yeah, actually, no, it's okay that I can't do something well, but the idea is, can I learn how to do it better? And if my success is connected to, can I learn how to do it better? Well, I put in the time to learn how to do it better, and that's what you want to go on. Then it was like, okay, right. Then of course, like, I'm not going to have done this very well because I didn't even know there was a problem. And so now, as I'm continuing to do the work, it's like, cool, the work is never done. Like, there's no end point. It's the journey. That is literally all of your measure, is like, what did you do today that was challenging to do yesterday? Like, what are you more comfortable doing today? And like, what seems fun to continue to work on, so that the frustration doesn't stop you from continuing, but the frustration inspires you to keep working to get past that. So in many ways, it has felt like this could not have come at a better time in my life for me, based on like how I learn and what I was going to need in order to kind of get past my ego to do some of the deeper work, whether dancing or social justice. But it's just been very interesting to be able to kind of look at that from a different perspective of, yeah, when you have a student's mindset, the world is open to you in a very different way than if you feel like, no, it's fixed. Like, I'm a teacher, I'm supposed to know things, and I'm the one who's talking instead of being I'm the one who's learning. So that was really nice. That was a really beautiful adjustment in my life.
Yeah, nice. We talked in the podcast. We talked often about awareness. You said it. You said it too. And this is one of the biggest things, I guess, we all learned. You said, I did things I didn't know I wasn't aware of, that it was wrong. And this is really nice. We spoke about it a lot. Thank you for this insight.
Yes, thank you. Actually,
sorry, Boris.
Maybe before we dive deep into our questions, I would like to ask you again: do you think it is like important for also like let's say Lindy Hop teachers or people who are very well known in the scene, that it's important for those people to always remember and go back to the uncomfort zone to feel that they that nobody knows you, and you can't do anything, and to feel the real flip side. Is that something that is important and that people should do more often? What do you think about that?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a really great question. Should teachers continue to put themselves in the role of a student? Yeah. And I think it's critical for one's success as being an instructor is to not only remember what it's like to be a student, so what it's like to be on the other side, so that you also know, like, sometimes those students aren't uninterested. They're just mentally busy processing the information, or maybe they didn't hear something really well and they're trying to listen to it about context, or maybe something else has shown up where they couldn't be present. So it's like how to be really gracious as a teacher, or just even ask questions like, is there something I can help you with? Do you need more time? Like, how is it that we then as instructors come at it from a place of like, hey, how else can I be of service to you, instead of like, hey, why are you not paying attention? So like, how do we also just keep that perspective, but also remembering like the things that as instructors that we find easy, it's because we have so much repetition in the movement or playing with the concept that of course it makes sense to us. And I have also found that by taking other people's classes, I can tell as an instructor, as a fellow instructor, that there's certain things the teachers will say and they have an assumed set of meanings by saying these certain buzzwords. But as somebody who's new to the dance form, I don't know what the buzzwords really mean. And even though I feel really silly asking, I can't rely on previous definitions because I'm like, it's never been defined for me. And I know that might seem silly because it kind of looks like I can dance, but how do you mean this? How are you describing this? And so to have those conversations where for them it's so obvious and it's like, right. Okay. I wonder for me as an instructor, where are my set of assumptions that are like, this is obvious. You should know this by the time that you're working with somebody like me, which most likely means, so for the listeners, what that statement means is where I am positioned in the Lindy Hop community is that I tend to be a festival worker. So people would go to a festival of some sort. So not a weekly class or not like a smaller event. It would normally be a larger event. And typically the individuals that go to the larger events have already committed to the world of Lindy Hop. Like they're already spending their free weekends doing this. They are, putting aside money to make sure that they can go to this. They've probably even divided their friends between their Lindy Hop friends and their not Lindy Hop friends. So like that's kind of the world I live in. So when somebody comes to work with someone like me or is at a camp where I am present, my assumption is they've probably already done this list of work and their teachers have prepared them. But now I realize we don't have a standard of what everybody is supposed to know. Right. And even though it makes sense that people would know that, the vocabulary and the shared knowledge changes. And so I think all of us grew up at a time that the name Frankie Manning is known. But I have to remember that new dancers don't know who Frankie Manning are. And not because they're not good people or that they're bad people or that their teachers have failed. But instead, it's that if they have never been introduced, there should be no reason why they should know who this person is and has done all of the clip review. So it's right, how is it that we have these conversations about what is really important in terms of going forward? And I think as a teacher, if you don't continue to be a student, it's really easy to forget these things because we often live in an echo chamber. So I think it's really critical, especially at the local level, to be finding outside information, and not only just so that you have new information for the students, but to keep your heart and your dance soul revitalized, where other people are also giving you their energy. Because as Boris, I know for sure that you're also an instructor, and then Phil, I don't know if you're an instructor.
Yes, I'm too. Yes.
You are. Okay, so then you also both know, as an instructor, you spend a lot of time giving to your students, where you're how do I make sure that I have very clear information to give you, or clear information for you to play with, but you are presenting a safe atmosphere for people to learn and open themselves up, whether emotionally or mentally, to trying on new, possibly slightly uncomfortable ideas with people that they might not know. And what it takes to be an instructor to set up an environment like that needs to come from a place of giving. And I have found that at some point, if I forget to get more energy back into my body, at some point I just noticed that I've maxed out. I actually don't have anything more to give because I forgot to return the energy back to me. And I feel like I do a much better job at giving out more energy than I do absorbing more. But now, since I've been a student, I feel like I have access to a lot more energy. So I actually feel like I have a lot more to give. So for me, in kind of being in the position of recycling that really good, excited energy about getting to be around people who are excited about your learning, I can get that again being a student, which makes me feel like I can be a stronger teacher now. So I would strongly encourage all of the instructors to definitely spend some time, at least for a solid month a year, if not for longer, just to not even just for the learning of your personal students, but for the energy that you receive in your body from getting to work with other people excited about your personal progress.
Yeah,
beautiful.
Really nice.
Nice answer.
Really nice. Nice. Nice picture. You painted a nice picture. Yeah. You said it. You pointed out there are local scenes, and you always have to get something from other scenes or from different point of views. And that's a question from our topic. It was two. We Boris and I tried to make a historical podcasts. We made some up about the style wars, the Hollywood style and the Savoy style, and we pointed out from our view, from the German view, from Hanover, from our view. But you've seen many scenes.
Style wars, yes.
And you live in Berlin, and Berlin is not Germany, but maybe you can talk about Berlin. Do you think there's a special, I don't know, Berlin style of dancing or a German style of dancing? Do you think, if you compare it, you were on so many workshops and festivals, and you've seen so many scenes. Do you think there's some German typical movement?
Probably we do not
something?
have we do not have several simple moves. We just have one move, one big move that lasts from the beginning to the end.
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I guess for full transparency, I've spent more time in Berlin teaching workshops, and a lot of them were intensives, which meant it was a very particular, like an even more narrow group of individuals that I got to work with in Berlin, as I've been coming in and out of Berlin on and off for maybe now the last 10 years. And so it wasn't really representative of the Berlin scene. So and as hopefully everybody knows who's listening to the podcast, if they've been in the scene for a while, being in a local community is different than being in the festival community. And even though it has a lot of the same people, the vibes are different because of who shows up and what expectations kind of exist, or who the DJs are, etc. So I have so much more practice at being in a festival scene than in a local scene. So my answer is absolutely tinted because of that, or is skewed, maybe is another way to say it. So what I'm saying I will absolutely share is not the truth, but it's from that particular corner of the dance world is where I can share some of this information. So, I mean, what I would say that is fairly common in Europe, and this is a very broad brushstroke, is that there seems to be kind of the more, I mean, I would call it Swedish just because I felt like the Swedes really popularized this movement, or they were around for this type of learning and it was the style that they chose. And because the Swedes were very early adopters of Lindy Hop in Europe, that when they traveled and they shared their knowledge base, that a lot of people wanted to look like them, as is often the fact with really great dancers, that people often want to emulate their instructors. So I feel like across Europe, you've definitely got a group of people that, let's say, look kind of like the Swedish dancers. I don't even know if that's the proper way of saying it, but let's just say in Europe, because the Swedes popularized a style, or have a very clear style, that we'll call it that for that reason. So there's a group, there are pockets of people all over Europe that kind of dance more Swedish style. And then there are a group of dancers that maybe have more access to boogie woogie in their background, whether or not most of their dancers came directly from the boogie woogie scene, and or the other top dancers that they would have learned from had boogie woogie in their background. And just to make sure this is clear, I'm not saying any of this as good nor bad, but just observations of kind of where the roots of where the communities would have come from. And then there is another group of dancers that kind of, for me, don't fall into either of those two categories. And it's either that they have a blend, or their instructors learned from somewhere else, and or they were able to make sure that the instructors that came in were so blended that there was no one way to hold on to a style. Unlike, let's say, going back to the style wars that you mentioned, growing up in California, I grew up in San Francisco in the Bay Area, and we had a very different style than LA. So LA was much more like Hollywood style, or I would say it was white Hollywood dancing, where San Francisco was more groove based, and or wiggly hop. That's what a lot of dancers called the San Francisco scene, were the wiggly hop dancers. And we did not dress very well, but there was a big blend of styles. A lot of the top dancers did hip hop and other dance forms. And so it wasn't traditional Hollywood, but also if you grew up in LA, it makes sense why you would learn LA dance style. Also, when you have the people who were still alive who danced in LA in the 40s, and it's like, okay, yeah, you actually have access to those humans. So it made sense. So I can't really say that like San Francisco had Savoy style, but it definitely had some Savoy style influence, but we danced to much lower tempo music. And the top dancers like did a lot of hip hop outside. So like people dressed kind of like they were in the hip hop community more than, you know, like shiny outfits and like cute puffy sleeves and skirts that like spun out. So I mean, like it was just a super different vibe. So in the last 10 years coming in and out of Germany, I would definitely say I never got the sense that there was Hollywood style or that there was LA style or like it wasn't really vintage Hollywood in the 40s. I'm basically just saying the same thing terribly in like 4 different ways. So like that's something I definitely have not seen, but I know it exists because there's different pockets of people. Like I think in Belgium, there's a couple of people that look like they walked straight out of a Hollywood movie set in in like the late 40s. But for the most part, I feel like in Berlin, the last couple times I went out, I would say that there was an absence of like Swedish style and maybe an absence of like the boogie woogie style. But it also very well could have been that all of the music that I've heard played in Berlin does not cater to that kind of movement style. So it's also like, well, there's a lot of trad jazz or traditional jazz for is maybe some of the newer listeners. And so it's maybe more like New Orleans style music or 2-beat where there's like a strong tuba. And if there's also not a lot of space, everybody's not moving a whole lot, in which case for me, Swedish style looks so great when you've got a lot of space, and like boogie also looks great with a lot of space, but we just weren't listening to music that was like closer to the 50s. Like a lot of it was very 20s and 30s style jazz is what I've been hearing in Berlin when we used to get to go out and hang out with people. You remember that? Yeah. So I mean, like, I guess I would say, I don't know if I can identify specifically like a German form, but it's been interesting to feel like Germany has done a fairly good job of, I want to say like keeping a neutral identity. Like I haven't shown up and gone like, oh, wow. Okay. So like when Swedes wanted to not be in Sweden, they came to this area in Germany, or like, oh, okay, so this is where the heart of boogie woogie is. It just kind of seems like most of the general Lindy Hoppers I have met have a fairly neutral style, in maybe in the same way that, like, I don't know if this is accurate, please correct my German, that if you spoke Hochdeutsch, that you wouldn't necessarily be able to locate where you are from, but that is the general accent. So you might also say there is no accent. So it's kind of like that. Like, it's like, I would say most of the Lindy Hop in Germany I've seen is kind of like the Hochdeutsch versus like a dialect of it. I mean, like, of course, every scene's slightly different, but I don't know. Does that analogy work? I feel like, okay.
For me, totally. Nice.
Yes, it works.
Right.
Yeah, because we want to be more aware. If we speak about the German dance scene, we are in the German dance scene, and we need someone who came from outside or have as a different point of view to just point out what are our styles, what are our problems, what are, I don't know, what is our future, what can we learn, what is the greatness, what are the difficulties.
Yeah.
And so we need to learn more about it. And it was a nice analogy.
Yeah, beautiful.
With the Hochdeutsch and dialect, it's really nice.
Yeah.
And do you think that the old timers, if I would say that, as they were more present in their own country, was it that the dancers in the US were more influenced by them than Europeans, I would say, because it is a long journey to Europe?
Yeah. So another really great question, and I feel like this is harder for me to really answer, mainly because I didn't grow up in a scene that had a strong emphasis on our dance elders. And so that wasn't something I really learned about. It's something I like understood, like people talked about getting clips. And when we couldn't get new clips of dancers kind of in our current time, or at that time, the current time, we would then go to like old Hollywood, or we would go as, like basically whatever we could find. And like old Hollywood clips were the easier ones to find, which also happened to have a lot of white dancers. And then you could find pockets of clips of like, I mean, Hell's a Poppin', of course, was like one of the easy clips to find with Black dancers. And there were definitely tap dancers, but there wasn't, at the beginning, I didn't see a lot of Lindy Hop clips with Black dancers. I remember seeing more with white dancers, but I saw a lot of great Black tap dancers. So I was like, okay, so I know tap and Lindy Hop are in a similar world, but I didn't see a lot more. And a lot of my peers didn't talk that much about old clips other than like kind of getting ideas, but there wasn't really a sense of we need to see if these people are alive and we should go find them and learn from them. It's more so like, I don't know, we're just looking for ideas and seeing what we could put into our own dancing. And I mean, it was also the same like in San Francisco, which is where like my history was built. There were a lot of the top dancers, as I said, did hip hop, but there was also a really strong West Coast swing community. And if you wanted to do a lot of dancing, you'd also go out to West Coast swing. And at the time, the West Coast swing community still danced to a lot of swing music, certainly relative to today. So, I mean, it maybe would have been more like rhythm and blues, but it still would have been in our bubble versus now a lot of them dance to more pop and more modern music, which by definition does not have a swung rhythm. So I would argue it's not swing dancing any longer. So now it would have been harder, but back then it was a lot of the same moves, just done with slightly different styling, but the music was mostly the same. So like there was a lot of multiple influences that we would just grab from other scenes of like, what cool move are they doing? What cool move are they doing? Like, okay, so what are the pros doing in any dance scene we could get a hold of? So we didn't really think about going to the elders because we more so had access to newer dancers who were pushing the envelope in some way, shape, or form. When I started to spend more time in LA, they had more of an emphasis on the old timers because the old timers were still alive and they were living there. And then once I started traveling to Harang and we had access to old clips and some of the elders, the dance elders would actually be there. Then it was like, okay, like this is really interesting. Like I didn't grow up in a world where this was often spoken about. So for that incredibly long introduction to this, I didn't grow up with a general sense of like, this was something I needed to be aware of. Like my friends didn't talk about it. The people I learned from didn't really talk about it. It was just like sometimes somebody like Frankie Manning would show up, but there wasn't like, I did not recall there being much emphasis or like, you know, Joe, this is a rite of passage is to get to learn from our elders. This is a very limited opportunity because they will only be around for however many years. So that was not clear to me. So that being said, knowing what I know now, I feel like the scenes that have the most richness in them, they are the ones that have honored the elders and have wanted to learn from the original dancers, because no matter what it is that we are creating now, they had so many years of knowledge that they built up at the time when the music was being created. And knowing that people like Norma Miller and Frankie Manning and Don Hampton used to hang out with people like Count Basie and Chick Webb and Duke Ellington, and it's like, you guys all used to smoke together. You would go drink together. Like, you guys hung out in the way that people could say that, like, I've hung out with, like, Peter and Ramona and, Naomi and Sky and Frida and Zaka. And, like, so in the same way that, like, I've hung out with maybe some of the other, like, fancy pants dancers of, like, our day, they were hanging out with the fucking badasses of the 20s and 30s and 40s. So, I mean, like, now that I think about it, I'm like, oh my God, why was this not discussed of like, hey, you know all that fucking awesome music we're listening to? You know the people who made it? These dancers hung with them. Like,
yes, yeah.
How much cooler does it get? It doesn't.
Yeah.
So I mean, I would say now my general sense is the communities that had a deeper connection to the elders, I think are just richer because they appreciate what the generations created and honor that. And I think when you live in a world where you only honor what's happening right now, that you really block out a lot of what is possible. But then it's also like, you're kind of only creating a world that like, if you're cutting edge, you're now worthy of being seen, versus going, it doesn't matter if you're older and that your body doesn't move the same way it did when you were in your 20s or 30s. We value you because of what you have to bring to the table in terms of experience and knowledge. And that's just something that you can't buy. Like there's no amount of money you can buy. There's no amount of dance camps you can go to absorb that information faster when these people spent a lifetime learning about it. So I feel like, I feel like that's been a huge loss in my general education that I didn't really understand. But with a lot of the work that's happening right now, there is a renewed interest in finding some of the elders that we still have, because it's not like, okay, there was Frankie and Norma and there was nobody else. It's like, what about everybody younger than them? And so there are more people who are coming to light, that are engaging, that are willing to engage with our white dance community, and are like, sure, you guys like have found us in Harlem and you want to talk to us about this. Okay, well, where have you been? Why didn't you find us sooner? But yeah, sure. Okay, let's do this.
Yeah, relating to that, I mean, that phenomenon that people who live just around the dance studio come the latest to the classes, right? So, and do you think that that maybe that as lots of Americans were surrounded by people who created this dance, maybe were a little bit blind to that or so, and those people who were so interested and didn't have those origin people, so to say, were more like researching for information, and maybe they even got more educated about this than the others who had those people around. Do you think this might be possible? And do you think this is also the case right now, where most of them already passed away, that the research and the new films that are getting online, there are more and more films online, that this research group or people, they actually have more knowledge, or get more knowledge just by researching, and not by those people who are just surrounded and are in this environment itself?
So, I mean, one of the things that I'm still trying to wrap my head around, even though I intellectually understand it, but like in my heart, I'm still struggling with it, is that I understand that there's a number of people still alive, like people who were winning the Harvest Moon Ball in like the late 40s. And I believe the Harvest Moon Ball went for quite some time afterwards. And so like we've found some people who are, I think, in their like late 60s. And it's just like, I feel like I had a sense of like, okay, we have a couple of these old timers, or we have a couple of these elders, and once they've gone, there's nobody left. And now it's like, oh, actually, no, we found all of these other people. So it's kind of like in my mind, it's just like, okay, if you weren't looking for them, you weren't going to find them. But there's a part of me that like intellectually understands, well, why weren't you looking for them? But in my heart, it's just like, I don't understand why we haven't had this discussion, or why had I not heard this part of the discussion? I recognize that discussions happen even if I'm not around to hear them, but it's just like, I'm just kind of shocked and like embarrassed that I hadn't thought to ask these questions, or I haven't been around people who've had these conversations to have brought this up previously. So, I mean, I think one of the main reasons, and like this is definitely like an embarrassment on America, but it's definitely a truth, is that because of the way that race or ethnicity is and is not spoken about in America, that it would have been hard to have, without doing the work that's happening now, it would have been hard to, I think, have made these steps. So I think like a very unflattering way at saying this is that I think the American dance scene was able to find a couple of key Black dancers, and they were kind of the token dancers of like, we've got Frankie Manning, he's an amazing ambassador. And I mean, like, this, it doesn't matter how wonderful these individuals are, if the idea is this is a Black dance and we found 2 Black people, and like they've got family members, so we found 4 Black people, we can be done looking, and now we can like build our community, and it's going to be full of white people. But we're not going to ask the question, where are the Black dancers? Like that is problematic. And that comes from like racism. And even if it's not like mean racism, it's built into the system of existing in a world where you're like, and like, I can't speak for all countries because I know that the ethnic makeup in every country and every city is different, but like, we have Black people in America, so it's not like we don't know about them. But it's really surprising that like I did as much dancing as I did, and I rarely saw Black dancers. And when I did, it didn't occur. I mean, I didn't think that they were ever out of place, but it also never occurred to me to go, why don't we have more Black dancers? And I don't ever remember having those conversations. So it's like, okay, and like this is like part of it being systematic is that I'll just say me, I was able to grow up in a world where I never thought to ask these questions. These things didn't come up. This wasn't pointed out. Like I lived in a world where I never had to face it, or I never had the opportunity to face it until, I don't know, like really the last year, it was kind of hard not to face this where you're like, oh no, like there's a really big problem. And I recognize you've all been talking about it. Like I recognize this has been an issue that has been talked about in many communities. I just was not connected to those conversations, and I'm embarrassed. So I think as people are doing more research now, I think it coincides with America starting to recognize that there's some real issues surrounding racism. And despite how well-meaning I think a lot of the community members in America are and feel like they are, we've just not done a lot of the work to basically go, where is the birthplace of swing dancing? It's Harlem. So why are we not spending more time in Harlem doing our pilgrimage? Where I would argue the pilgrimage, when you do Lindy Hop really seriously, it's to go to Harang. But Harang is not where Lindy Hop started. Harlem is where it started. So it's just interesting though that like the Mecca, like Lindy Hop Mecca, is in a tiny Swedish town in the middle of nowhere instead of in Harlem, where the dancers literally still live there. And I know New York's expensive, but Sweden's not cheap. So it's like, okay, well, we could manage it. So it's like the only thing that I can really point to right now, and I think there's enough evidence to support it, is that there's like, until America is able to work through more of its issues surrounding race and also just even dealing with the guilt around it of like, God, we've been so terrible. And like, we didn't even know, like, let's just pretend like this was from a nice perspective of like, we didn't even know we're going to do better and change it. The fact that we didn't do anything sooner when so many people have been so crazy about dancing that it's like, how did we not talk about this? And unfortunately, because a lot of American instructors have come to Europe and have gone to other countries to teach, like we taught the best way that we knew how, and we taught the way that we learned, and how we learned was not necessarily from the elders of the dance. So even if we passed down the most, like the best knowledge we had, and we did it with as much love and care as we could have, the fact is that we were just missing a large part of the story because we weren't connected to a large part of the story, because America did, like, the system is set up in a way to like keep things so separated. And so now I'm really hoping that as we continue to move forward is that we can rebuild the connection between the Black community and Black culture and connect it in with the progenitors of the dance and bring more of the culture in. So it's clear of like, we are guests here. Like, white people didn't create this. Like, we might feel like we are strongly connected to it because we've been working on it and we've been tinkering with it. But in some ways, it also wasn't necessarily ours to tinker with outside of the view of the people who created it. So it's like, if I think about it that way, it's just like, actually, yeah, we actually really needed other voices. We needed other opinions. We needed we needed more in there, and not because we did something wrong, which it could definitely be argued that what we did was wrong, but like because there was so much value that we missed out on because we thought we could do it by ourselves instead of going, there's a wealth of knowledge right over there and we just haven't included them. So I'm really hoping that people get to do this from a really excited standpoint of like, oh my God, there's so much more knowledge that we've not gotten to spend any time with. I'm so grateful that before we lost even more elders, that more people started showing interest and are really excited about doing a new kind of work that the scene largely has not done. So this is such a new and exciting time for the community. Like, I really hope people feel like this is a great opportunity instead of like a sense of like, well, I'm guilty, that's what I'm doing.
Right.
Yeah. Nice.
Whoa.
Yeah, we talked in one of our podcasts, we talked about that, about idols. We talked which are our dance idols and teaching idols. And then we talked about it that in 50, 60 years, our idols now are the old timers then. You know, you are on festival, you are on festivals, you are on workshops, and in 50, 60 years, Lindy Hop will survive and SwingTanz will survive. I don't doubt it. They say you are one of the old timers.
Yeah. I
Yes,
prefer
not now.
old fart. Yeah. No, I prefer the term old fart, but I guess we'll see. Yeah. That's
Yes,
how
and
we call it in America.
and if you look at this, if we don't honor the old timers and the elders, in 56 years, maybe no one will talk about the idol figures of our decade.
Yeah.
Yes. And we miss out so much values. You said values. Yeah, it's a really good word for it. And I guess it's a part of a history which is told the best from them who lived there. Huh? So we don't can Google it, or we can read about it, but we just hear about it and take the values and get them. But if you are in 56 years one of the old timers of the scene, or I don't know how you call it, what will you say about this decade? Well, if someone will talk to you and say, "Hey, you lived in the 2020s or the 2010s,
You survived,
and you were there, you survived everything. What's happening there?
Well,
how was it?"
Well, hopefully there's not a big economic crash in 9 years. I just feel like, oh my God, the last thing we need is an enormous crash. But we'll see how that all goes.
What would you say about the last 5 years? If someone will ask you, hey, how was it from 2015 to 2020 in the dance scene in everywhere?
I mean, I guess what I would be able to say is that it was an amazing time of unrest, which got people off their asses and actively choosing how to go forward. And what I mean by that is I feel like it's like if nothing's too wrong, you can kind of just keep going the way it is. You might have a similar saying, but in America, the saying is if it's not broken, don't fix it. So if it mostly works, you just kind of leave it. So I guess until things really break, people aren't going to challenge what's happening. And so, like, I mean, in the last 5 years, the Me Too movement came to the forefront, and the teaching staff had a little bit of an overhaul, and safe space policies started becoming more of the norm, which is really great because it is a social atmosphere. But like in general, even though like it's an amateur, like on net, our community is an amateur community. But like we still need to have general rules in place in the same way that you would be like, well, shirts and shoes, otherwise no service, or like, just right, like very basic things. Or it might be like going forward, like you need to wear a mask, and like if you're going to be at a dance, or these are we can have dances for vaccinated individuals because of safety protocols, like whatever it is going forward. We just need to outline what the rules are, and for the most part, I feel like people are happy to abide by the rules if they know what they are. There are definitely, so getting back to it, we now have safe space policies, which 10 years ago would have been even crazier than what it was 5 years ago when people were like, what are you talking about? Even though there was a number of the community that was like, we've been needing this for a while, but we didn't know how to have the conversation. Similarly, the conversations that we're having now, a lot of us didn't know how to have these conversations a year ago surrounding community members and community values and what it means to be comfortable in the scene if you don't necessarily look like the three of us. Yes. And regardless if your city has a wide mix of people, like let's say in like Lithuania, that might be a great place. Like a lot of the Lithuanian population mostly looks the same. I mean, certainly like when I've been there, has mostly looked the same. I don't have statistics, so I can't back that up.
Like
so
all the Japanese look all the same.
So I think, like, I mean, like, so like, I think so I mean, basically, like in America, for example, like depending on what city, you have a very, very wide range of diversity. So like if you live in a city that lacks a lot of diversity, maybe like Vilnius would be the city, that like some of these conversations might be harder to have because you can have them in theory, but it's hard to have them in practice. Yeah. But like, how do we have these conversations both in theory and in practice so that it's like, here's what we want. We want to build a better future for the Lindy Hop community than the one that we previously imagined. Because if we listen, there's a lot of people that will say, we could do better than what we were doing. And that's not even to say that we were doing bad. But to say that what we did was the best that there was and that there's no changes necessary, for me to feel, that makes me feel like we're not dreaming big enough, is to feel like we've already maxed out on our potential of awesome. Again, very American. So for me, I feel like, okay, so how could we do better? Like, what are the things that we were missing that we might not know if we were comfortable? So like, for the most part, I was fairly comfortable in the scene. So knowing that, I'm not necessarily the person to help come up with a new vision. Where I am in the community is I'm somebody who can listen and go, I recognize that that's important, and I'm in a position that can help make those changes. But I'm not in a position to be able to see this stuff because of all the various privileges I have, whether or not that it's like, I'm a white English-speaking woman who is in a position of power. So like where I'm standing, I only can see so much, but I can also do a whole lot. So it's kind of like, how do we make sure that our community is open to having conversations and to think about how do we make this even better than it was before? So I think if somebody said like, what was it like to live through that time? I mean, I would say it was like equally scary because it was like, are we going to make it? Are we still going to have a dance scene? Like, should we have a dance scene? To a point of pride of like, it was really incredible to see how many people decided, you know what, we are going to have a dance scene and we are going to make it better. And it's not going to necessarily be an easy road forward, but we know we can make progress because we know that we find so much joy out of this activity in our community that we want to have more joy. And that's what we're going to be solving for, is how do we make this more comfortable? And so that's one of the beliefs that I feel like I need to deeply hold on to, is that the community that I see and that I'm getting to be in often is one that wants other people to share in their joy and the love of the dance and are willing to do the work to create a better, happier, more inclusive future and are willing to do the work. So like scary, fun, like charming, terrifying, sweaty, you know, like,
all those feelings.
all of the things.
Really nice.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, we will come to some question for the future and the swing dance future. Maybe swing dance, more swing dance related. We have a few questions we often ask our interview partners. Do we call you partner?
Yes.
Is it an interview partner? Yes.
Yeah.
Interview
Or
guest.
I
guess. And concerning swing dance, maybe mostly Lindy Hop, what do you think, which dance will be influencing swing dance the most?
I mean, I would say based on what I see a lot of the other instructors working on, based on what they post on Instagram. So again, that's a very particular subset of people on Instagram. That's where my data is coming from. Would be tap. I feel like I've been seeing a lot of teachers working on tap dancing, which blows my mind only because I feel like my neighbors would kill me if I was tap dancing inside. But I mean, maybe not. But I think tap is what we're going to see, which in many ways also just makes a lot of sense when we think about African-American values or like Black cultural values in the arts, and rhythm is a key component. So it would make sense that a bunch of people would be spending their time and energy trying to connect more deeply to their rhythm. So not only it's in their feet or in their arms or like in their face, but it's just like deeply in them. And certainly if you grow up in a culture where you're dancing all the time and there's just this kind of, there's just a feeling of being around so much music and where people, you know, dance regularly because it's not a weird thing, but it's just because people do. But you get to experience rhythm in a different way than when you start learning about rhythm when you're older, but you also have a mental capacity to learn things differently as an adult than you do as a child. So I think as the type of in-depth work that a lot of the instructors around the world are doing, I think we are going to see more tap dancing, even though that's not what I'm working on, but I would say based on my Instagram feed, tap is probably the next dance trend to come into the scene.
Yes. Yeah, regarding this sound, I just want to mention that when I was young, I wanted to play the drums. I love the drums. I still love the drums, but I can't play them. And my father always said, like, if you find a a place where you can play the drums, then play them, but not here. It's too loud. And just years
I love
later,
the idea. Not
yeah, yeah, not here. Just I want to have my space, so please be quiet. You're disturbing kids, so go away. No, but I just years later I realized that there are those pads where you could drum, just not hearing anything, right?
Yeah.
And it's also true for tap, right? If you do the soft chew thing, it's not as loud as it could be, right?
Yeah.
So maybe it would be a solution also for you.
Yeah.
Not to kill your neighbors.
Definitely room for thought. The dance forms that I'm currently working on right now are hip hop and house. And I'm not saying I'm any good, just because every now and again I feel like when teachers say that they're working on something, there's the immediate assumption of you're this good in Lindy Hop, therefore you must be the same level of good. And it's just no. Like
what?
I'm a beginner in class that you're like, oh, that poor student like has no idea what's happening. Yeah, so I'm that student, and it's definitely one of those, like, I'm starting to become less embarrassed, but by and large, I am still very much a beginner, and the beginner classes are still very challenging based on the instructors I've chosen. The beginner classes are very, very challenging for me even now because of also what I understand about what's important about the dance and what I want in my body, where it's like, I don't need moves. Like, so this is definitely a sidestep to all of this, like, as a beginner dancer, and this was a long time ago, I remember thinking I need more moves. And if I have more moves, I'll be more impressive. And now it's very clear to me, it doesn't matter if I had 35 more hip hop moves. I'm still the exact same dancer I was, just with a bigger vocabulary. But because I come from another dance form, I already have lots of vocabulary. So that's not the issue. It's can I like bounce and move fluidly through things. So like I am just trying to learn how to keep my bounce. And I will say, as much as I thought I like understood something about bounce, I knew nothing before I like went to hip hop, like nothing at all. So like now doing stuff like hip hop, I'm like, all I want to do is work on groove and bounce. And if we do anything else, great, but I really don't have a preference. So every time the teachers know that they ask if I'm in class, like, what do you want to work on? I'm always like, groove or arms. And I'm like, what do we do with our arms? Yeah, so those are the two things, because I'm like, if I get that, I will look like a better dancer, even if I don't have the vocabulary.
Yeah, that's true.
It's the thing that makes me not look like a hip hop dancer. I mean, there's a lot of things that make me not look like a hip hop dancer. But my vocabulary for somebody who's been dancing, I mean, well, not against the other people dancing the same amount of time, but like I can go to a beginner class and it's clear I have way more vocabulary than the other beginners, but it doesn't look like hip hop. So in many ways, I have no vocabulary because of it. So
yeah, sure.
Yeah. That's kind of an adventure of like learning to dance. So dear newer dancers, it's not about the vocabulary. It's about the bounce and the groove of the music. All right.
Amen. Great. All right.
Yeah, but I have some technical issues. Sometimes my tab closed. I don't know.
Okay.
But concerning the time we spent, I guess we will ask you the last two questions.
Okay. Should I give you like 10-second answers? Because I can also make you short answers instead of the long answers.
It depends how much time do you have.
Okay.
And the first question is a really, we think it's a really easy question, but we wrote the question really complicated, we think.
Okay.
So good luck with that.
So maybe it's not a good question. The question is, what was the one thing for swing dancing, the scene or the learning teaching aspect, you will definitely keep that you developed during the COVID time?
I think I might just keep online classes in general as we continue forward. I think I will keep online classes. Not that I teach them every single month, but I think I will keep those mainly because I've gotten to work with certain students around the world that I was otherwise never going to. And it's such a privilege to get to connect with individuals that otherwise would have been inaccessible to me, or me inaccessible to them. So I think that would be the thing I'll keep, is that I'll still do some online classes just for the people that are like, I've always wanted to take a class with you. So, like, please be available. Yeah, there we go.
Nice.
Nice.
Beautiful.
Boris,
yeah,
the last question.
Yeah, I mean, we already talked about it actually. So the last question would be, what will be the next big thing for swing dance?
Maybe it's not tap dance.
So I can interpret that the previous question, which was like, what other dance forms will influence the Lindy Hop scene, which was the tap. And then this question, Boris, is where do I think the Lindy Hop scene is going to go next?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Or what will be the big next thing? Maybe it's a band or music, or I don't know.
Yeah, so my guess, and like, again, totally biased information based on what I'm working on and what I want to see, is I would like to see more solo dancing at social dances or at parties where it became more normal that if you just wanted to dance by yourself that you could, or that when we were partner dancing that there was more breakaways where not only people were comfortable moving in and out of breakaways, but there was also the set of assumption of like, if you can dance by yourself, then we totally should have you do that. And for everybody that's like, I'm only comfortable with another human being, to get them to also kind of face those fears and realize that they are actually good enough by themselves. So that's like, also maybe that's very American of like, you are good enough, just be yourself. But also like in general, like to be a great partner dancer, for me, you not only need to be a great dancer, but also somebody with great partnering skills. And a lot of people can hide behind the partnering skills, but don't need to work on their solo as much. But when their solo dancing improves, so does their partnering, because they understand how their body moves. Now, if they are great solo dancers, but choose not to do that, totally fine. But most people have not been making that decision. They've made the decision of like, I'm not interested, I'm not going to. So I very much hope that it just becomes more normal to just get to like dance in a circle with your friends. And it's not like a weird thing people do. It's what people now want to do, because now a lot of people have had a year worth of dancing by themselves, and now they kind of still want to do solo stuff, but in the company of their friends. So that's kind of what I hope to get to see, is more solo dancing, either within the partnership or just solo dancing at a social dance.
Nice. Have you ever been to a solo workshop like Jazz Roots or so?
Only for the parties.
All right.
Parties. I keep my fingers crossed that someday I'll get invited to one of those, but I've been known as a partner dancer, so I'm hoping that's why. Or I could say it's because I was not a very good solo dancer before. So maybe now that I'm a better solo dancer than I was, that is true, and I'm better than I was. Maybe now I could get invited to some solo workshops. We'll see. We'll see.
Because there's also this bubble when you are at the workshop and at the parties, and everybody's dancing solo. Then when you're going back to another scene or another workshop at the next weekend, like, why is nobody dancing solo? What's happening here? That's you're always in your bubble. Like, that's when you are for 5 or 6 weeks in Herang and you go out in normal life. That's like, what is happening?
Yeah, so that's real. So I know this is totally off topic, but Boris, playing off of that, so for the dancers that have not been to Herang, or you could just say any week-long camp, or just any intense experience is probably the most appropriate way to generalize it. Anytime you do a really intense dance week, you have to know that there's a readjustment period when you engage in your local community, or even when you just go back to a regular life, because you've been living in this like really intense, super focused bubble, surrounded by other people who are like getting nerdy or getting like intense in the same way. And if you forget that, the transition back to normal life can be super weird when you're also like, why is it not daylight all the time?
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
Why aren't you dancing? Or like,
why is nobody other dancing?
Yeah, exactly. So like, so this last summer, so now almost a year ago, because in Berlin, we were able to open up and still have dance classes during the summer. I went to a dance camp, and it was for street styles. So like hip hop, house, popping, locking, grime, and a whole bunch of other things that I don't necessarily know the names of. And it was 9 hours of dancing a day. And this is where I'm like, I am so grateful there was no social dancing at night, because there's no way I would have been able to do it. So it was 3 hours of class, and you would eat, 3 hours of class, you would eat 3 more hours of class, you'd go to bed, and you'd wake up and you'd do it all again for 5 straight days. I was out of my mind come Friday, because the class starts on Monday. I was out of my mind. And so like, when I get back, because you can't eat enough calories if you are dancing that hard. It's like not possible. And we all ate there at camp. And luckily all you did was go feed yourself, go to the dance room and go back to your room. There was nothing else to do because otherwise you can't make decisions. Your brain is fried. So trying to get back to Berlin, it was like, okay, cool. I need to take a couple of trains. I'll get there. And then getting back in, I was like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do next because my schedule had been made for me. And it's like, it took me 3 days to go, okay, right, you know how to do this. You wake up, you feed yourself, and then you decide what you're going to do for the day. It was so challenging. I was a bit of a zombie when I could return.
Yeah, that is true for all those like intense experiences. Like I was last year, or no, not last year, the year somewhere in the 20s. I was for like one week or so in like a Buddhist camp, so to say. Like everybody's like meditating the whole day. Not really, but feeling like that. And then going out, like everybody's so unconscious and not aware of what he or she's doing, and like, okay, what's happening with you? Like, but I just had a picture in my mind. I have to share. Like, imagine being like for 1 week, or like not intense. I don't want to say intense here, but being like on a nude vacation for 1 week, going back to normal life.
Nude?
Yes, nude.
Ah, okay.
And then like, why is everybody wearing clothes? That would be strange. Maybe I have to wear clothes as well.
I guess, I should get dressed today.
Yes, today maybe.
Oh, you are wearing clothes? That's just painted on here.
Yeah, it's just tattooed.
You would fit right into Berlin, Boris, because that's definitely what I saw today out by the canal.
What?
By the Gespräch.
Oh, yeah, okay.
So many people without clothes on. It was like, yep, all right, the Germans are out. Here we go.
Yeah, there's and so we close the circle. There's a wonderful German word for that. It's Freikörperkultur.
Oh yes, that's one.
It's free body culture.
Yeah, there we go.
Freikörperkultur, nice.
Yes, and it's invented by the people.
I don't know.
Who are in the community.
Close to Berlin, I would say. I don't know.
Yeah, really, really nice. So. We had our podcast, and it's nearly the end, Boris.
Yes, it's nearly the end. Do we want to do our last thingy?
Or? Yes, but before we do it, we want to thank you, Jo, that you took the time for us to talk with us and about many topics, and we want to thank our listeners.
Yes.
Yeah, that you made the hour or maybe a bit more with us. Maybe it was entertaining, maybe it was educational, but we hope it wasn't boring.
Well, I really appreciate being asked to be on, and I really needed a reason to put on some eyeliner and like a fancy shirt, because I otherwise basically only live in like sweatpants or dance clothes unless I have a reason to be on video. Boris, which is why I asked, it's like, am I going to be on video? I just don't know. I'm happy to do it.
Yeah, it's not the nude day today.
Yeah, exactly.
Put on some clothes.
Basically, yes, exactly. Some of that Freikörper.
Yeah.
And we all hope that after this situation we are living in, we have a small time where we start with our new life or old life, or I don't know when we come out here. And we have one thing, how we close the podcast. Maybe it will was heißt ein Klappen, Boris? Maybe it will work. Maybe it will work. And we say simultaneously and freeze. Jo, and we want to try it with you. And maybe we hit the freeze together.
Okay, can we pose as well, or we just say and freeze together?
You don't have to pose because it's more or less an audio podcast, but you can freeze if you would like to.
Okay. Okay.
So Boris, you will start it, and we try to hit it.
Yeah, okay, let's do that. And freeze.
Freeze.
Man, look out, man. That's a killer. Oh, man, that's a killer. Let's play that again, man. Got to do it.
Well, so I do live in Germany, but I live in Berlin, which is not Germany. And in the same way that New York is not America, Berlin is not Germany. Yeah, I mean, I saw that we're recording, so I was just like, oh, game on, let's do this. Be fun right now. That's what happens when you're a recovering American, that you're like, oh, I can't quite help myself.
Yeah, and I, as you said our names, that you pointed at us, which
I tried.
Nobody will see, maybe. But anyways,
Thanks for including
Yes.
me. And I very much look forward to seeing everybody face to face, hopefully in 2022, if not at the end of 2021.
Yes,
We will
hopefully.
hope so.
Let's
Yeah.
dance.
Yes,
So we
that's it.
Solo or couple-wise. Doesn't matter.
Totally. All right, you all. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah.
Thank
Have a good day.
you.
Bye-bye.
Have a nice day. Bye.